If you look up at the sky in a park today, you might see a small plastic buzzing object capturing 4K video of a family picnic. If you look at the news, you see advanced military aircraft changing the course of history without a pilot ever leaving the ground. And soon, you might look out your window to see a package being lowered onto your doorstep by a flying robot. We call them drones. They have become a normal, almost mundane part of modern life. But the story of how we got here is anything but normal. It is a strange, sometimes terrifying, and often ridiculous journey that involves exploding balloons, pigeons with cameras strapped to their chests, a famous Hollywood actor, and a garage invention that changed the world. To understand the drone, we have to realize that for most of history, the idea of flying without a pilot wasn't about taking photos. It was about trying not to get killed. This is the history of the drone. The explosive beginnings, Venice, 1849. The very first chapter of unmanned flight doesn't begin with an engine or a computer. It begins with wind and gunpowder. The year was 1849, and the Austrian Empire was laying siege to the city of Venice in Italy. The Austrians had a problem. The city was surrounded by water and lagoons, making it difficult to move their artillery close enough to fire. An Austrian artillery lieutenant named Franz von Acacius came up with a creative, if somewhat chaotic, solution. He launched 200 pilotless balloons loaded with bombs towards the city. The idea was that the fuses would burn down, and the bombs would drop directly onto the Venetians. It was the world's first air raid. However, the wind is a fickle ally. While some bombs did hit their target, a sudden change in wind direction blew many of the balloons right back over the Austrian lines, bombing their own army. It was a military disaster, but it proved a point. You could send a weapon into the sky without sending a man along with it. The pigeon photographers, while the military was playing with balloons, a German apothecary named Julius Neubronner was inventing the surveillance drone using nature. In 1907, he patented a method for attaching tiny, lightweight cameras to homing pigeons. The camera had a pneumatic timer that would snap a picture as the bird flew over the landscape. It sounds like a cartoon, but it worked. The German military actually considered using these pigeon drones for reconnaissance in World War I, while the idea was eventually scrapped in favor of airplanes. The concept of remote surveillance was born. It established the desire to see what the enemy was doing from above without risking a human life, a philosophy that drives drone technology to this day. World War I and the flying bomb. When the Wright brothers proved that powered flight was possible, the race was on to remove the pilot. During World War I, the British and Americans worked secretly on what they called aerial targets. In 1917, the Americans developed the Kettering Bug. It was a biplane made of wood and paper mache that cost $400 to build. It was essentially the grandfather of the cruise missile. You would calculate the distance to the enemy, fuel the plane with exactly that amount of gas, and launch it on a rail. When the engine stopped, the wings would detach, and the fuselage packed with explosives would fall from the sky. It was crude, it was inaccurate, and it was never used in combat because the war ended just as it was being finalized. But the technology of radio control was slowly catching up to the ambition of the engineers. The birth of the war drone. You might be wondering, where did the war drone actually come from? The answer lies in the 1930s with the British Royal Navy. They developed a radio-controlled biplane called the DH. A to be Queen Bee, it was used for target practice ships would try to shoot it down to train their gunners. The plane buzzed loudly and aimlessly through the sky, much like an insect. In nature, a male bee that does no work and exists only to serve the queen is called a drone. American Admiral William Stanley visited Britain, saw the queen bee in action, and brought the concept back to the US Navy. The Americans adopted the insect terminology, and these pilotless, target planes became known officially as drones. The name stuck, transforming from a naval nickname into a global term. The Hollywood connection here is a twist you probably didn't see coming. One of the most important figures in drone history was a Hollywood movie star. Reginald Denny was a successful British actor in the 1930s, but his hobby was building radio-controlled model planes. He believed these models could be used to train army gunners more cheaply than full-sized aircraft. He pitched the idea to the US Army, and they laughed at him. They thought he was just a toy maker, the Cold War and the jet age. After World War II, the Cold War turned the drone from a target dummy into a spy. The US needed to see what was happening behind the Iron Curtain without losing pilots, especially after the Utah spy plane incident where a pilot was shot down over the Soviet Union. This led to the development of the Ryan Firebee, a jet-powered drone that could fly fast and high. But the real shift happened in the 1980s and 90s with a brilliant engineer named Abraham Karam, often called the Drone Father, working in his garage in Los Angeles. He built a drone called the Albatross using simple materials. It was incredibly efficient and could stay in the air for dozens of hours. The CIA and the Pentagon took notice. His designs eventually evolved into the Predator drone. Initially used just for surveillance in the Balkans, the military soon realized they could strap Hellfire missiles to it. This changed warfare forever. For the first time, a pilot sitting in a shipping container in Nevada could control a plane in Afghanistan, creating a disconnect between the warrior and the war that is still debated ethically today. The consumer revolution, DJI for decades, drones were strictly military tools costing millions of dollars. So how did they end up under your Christmas tree? The answer is the smartphone revolution. In the late 2000s, components like accelerometers, gyroscopes, and GPS chips became tiny and cheap because they were being mass-produced for iPhones and Androids. A young Chinese engineering student named Frank Wang was obsessed with helicopters. He founded a company called DJI out of his dorm room. He realized that by using these cheap smartphone sensors, he could build a flight controller that made flying a drone easy. Before this, flying a remote-controlled helicopter required immense skill. Wang's technology did the balancing for you. In 2013, DJI released the Phantom. It was white, non-threatening, and ready to fly out of the box. It launched the drone craze, putting aerial photography into the hands of real estate agents, YouTubers, and farmers. Conclusion: the future overhead. Today, we stand on the edge of the next era. Drones are inspecting wind turbines in the North Sea, planting trees in deforested areas of the Amazon, and delivering life-saving blood to remote hospitals in Rwanda. The technology that began with clumsy balloons bombing Venice has evolved into a tool of limitless potential. Whether we view them as invasive spies or miraculous helpers, one thing is certain: the sky above us has changed forever. The drone is no longer just a military secret or a toy, it is a permanent fixture of our future. So the next time you hear that faint buzzing sound overhead, remember the pigeons, the Hollywood actors, and the garage inventors who made it possible. Thanks for watching.